of, let's say, like a 10-year-old girl getting her period.
That's a separate. You're right.
But it's used on cis children. I think like what you're talking about is precocious puberty.
But it's not used on perfectly healthy, physically able-bodied children, right? So
that's what I just said.
Modest Hikima donated $200. Charlie, sorry you had to travel to California for the show. My boy did you dirty by putting you next to the demon. WTF?
I don't think you're a demon, by the way.
Props on the new Rickson.
Okay, well maybe you are a demon. May Christ be with
you are brain dead. Sad.
All right, Modest Hikima, good to see you in the chat.
I'll reference one book,
though.
and she's a non-political doctor. Her name is Dr. Miriam Grossman. It's a book called Lost in Translation. She has treated, not just theorized. She's a clinician and a physician, not just someone who writes abstract medical journals. And she is one of the most outspoken people against what is called gender-affirming care. And she's treating hundreds of kids that are now damaged by this. So I know
detransitioners exist, but what do you say to the thousands of trans people that actually report happiness and being healthy after they receive gender-affirming care?
Don't doubt that in the short term, testosterone therapy from someone who has a fair amount of testosterone, it can make you feel confident. It can make you feel better in your skin. That is not a lasting effect, though.
But it is for some people.
Well, the suicide rate. I can't say that word. The self-harm rate after 8 to 10 years actually goes up. It nearly doubles, and we're still studying it. That's the other point. Is that I'm not going to throw around a lot of studies here. And they very well might be right. It might have helped them individually, but let me give you an example. If a medication is on the market and it harms 1 in 250,000 people, for example, Robitussin. You guys ever take Robitussin? No, it's a cough thing. It's they found that one of their lots of Robitussin last week might have been contaminated, and they did a massive recall, right? And it was just a whisper of it. Okay. The point that is in medicine, the first rule used to be first do no harm. And the fact
still is, right?
No, they've changed it.
The Hippocratic Oath?
They've changed it, yeah. They have.
Who's they?
The American Medical Association and a lot of the medical institutions. It's similar, but it's not the same.
They've been changed by woke ideology?
Well, you'd be surprised, actually. The medical industry has been taken over by a lot of radical
All doctors are woke now?
Well, for example, when they were giving monoclonal antibodies in the city of New York, they were prioritizing people based on the color of their skin. Black individuals in New York got monoclonal antibodies above their white counterparts.
Was it based on the color of their skin, or like maybe their background related to like their socioeconomic status?
It was racial, but I don't want to get too deep into that rabbit hole. But the point that I'm just trying to make is that in medicine in particular, you must have a cautious approach, even if there were pluses and positives, which might very well be true. If there's even a 1%, a 2% adverse event, you pull the drug immediately, because you first do no harm. If there's something that is actively damaging a society, and it's now a certifiable fact that we see thousands of young kids are being told that they can transition, when in reality they have other underlying issues that we should address. Depression, trauma, anxiety, or they're on the autism spectrum disorder, and they get mislabeled on whether a TikTok video or some sort of other thing makes them feel as if they might have, a transgender issue when they very well might have other issues that need to be addressed. 1 in 27 men young boys are autistic. Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to
totally fine. I just had a quick question for you two, since you guys had pretty strong positions on this. Can men get pregnant?
No.
Oh,
Grid 1 Motorsports donated $200. If we want to talk numbers, then honesty requires we first admit that gender dysphoria is a mental condition which should be treated first before any physical treatments are given. Accuracy matters.
All right, Grid 1 Motorsports.
They no longer call it gender dysphoria, unfortunately. I would actually make your argument for you. They don't even call it a medical condition. They call it, I actually don't even know what it's actually called. Gender dysphoria used to be the clinical term, but
they've changed it since.
Yeah, that's right. But I can go deeper into that. The old way we used to treat this is called watchful waiting, where we believed that puberty was the solution, not the problem. And almost every single case, and Europe was actually the pioneer of this, is that when you allow puberty to play its course, these individuals, they might end up being lesbian or gay, but not transgender. And that's a completely different thing that doesn't require hormones or eventually antidepressants on top of it. I'm sorry, Pixie, you were going to say something.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
My question was, can men get...
Yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. Fundamentally, we have kids that are, they don't even really have a good concept of male, female, So for that,
Especially prepubescent kids.
it's prepubescent kids. So, it doesn't at all surprise me to find out that like, oh, after they get through puberty, once they actually start to realize what being a woman or being a man actually is like and what it actually is, they decide to change their mind, And that's the one thing that I think that we need to be careful with a lot of these people. We need to be careful with the fact that what if these people do change their mind, and then, after we've done all this surgery to them, they can't just go back. If you socially transition a child, they could just put on a normal clothes, right? But if you biologically transition their child and then
there's no
they
recourse.
change their
No
mind.
fallback.
Yeah, there's no going back. You can't turn back on that one. There's no flipping the switch back on. Some people be like,
No.
"Oh, just stop taking the puberty blockers." Well, if taking the puberty blockers makes it so you don't develop the equipment needed to be a man, right? Well, then, you're kind of forcing them down that road. You're putting them down that road.
You've done irreparable damage. You can never go back, and that could
there's no
affect you
turning
for
back.
your entire life. That could make you want to hit the backspace, right? That's what we say
Yes.
nowadays. It could make you want to hit the backspace because of how damaging that is to your psyche. It's an awful thing.
Yeah, I think it's just best to just wait until people are adults, and then if you decide to make a decision like that, then the ramifications are on you, because in the end of the day, you're an adult and you can make your own decisions about your own body. But when we're talking about children, it's a completely different ballgame.
Get pregnant.
Two things. I would say if you're a biological male, if we're gonna define male through biology or whatever, then no.
Biology
I do
or
want
whatever.
to push back on some things that I heard earlier.
Well, before you do that, go ahead, Aaron. Do you have a answer to the?
I would say yes, because anybody who has a uterus has the capacity to give birth. So, for
okay.
example, a trans guy who gets pregnant, yes, would be a man who is pregnant. But if you're talking about a man who is assigned a man at birth and does not have a uterus, then no, he doesn't have the ability to get pregnant. You look at me like I'm crazy or what? Do you disagree?
But
Well,
a
to be
lot of women-
technical,
So you wanna know
right?
why
Sorry,
young-
to
You're
be
good, you're
technical,
good.
biological women can get pregnant, but trans men can get pregnant too, but they're not biological women. So fundamentally, it's all about biology, and it doesn't really matter about what you identify as. So if you say
Correct.
like a man could get pregnant, what are you talking about? Like a trans man, or are you talking about a biological man? If you're talking about a biological man, well then no, biological men cannot get pregnant. But if you're talking about like trans people in terms of like their gender, well then yeah, technically a person that identifies as a man can get pregnant because they are biologically a woman. But fundamentally, even if you acknowledge that, you're also kind of acknowledging biology, because I mean, it all comes down to recognizing biology. That's really what it comes down to.
Young men are going away from the left. That's why young men are leaving the left.
Why? They wanna get
Why?
Because what you just said is
Because they're uncomfortable acknowledging reality.
what you
That
just
some trans men can
what-
get pregnant.
what
It's
you
like,
just said is at war with reality, and
I mean,
massacring.
a lot of women can't get pregnant
basic
either.
vocabulary.
So that doesn't
Yeah,
define
exactly.
It's just a
if
question.
men are
It's just a
women.
question. I'll let you come in just a sec, Pixie. Which one of you referenced chromosomes? Is that well? You said like, oh, you didn't check our chromosomes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, people understood what a woman was before chromosomes were discovered. So the definition does not require this type of abstraction.
People understood what a woman was on the basis of the societal norms at the time, generally speaking, right?
Well, it's more
Which was my
precisely. It's about
answer,
like
yeah.
the gonads. If you were at any point in your life going to
Can I
produce
say
large
something?
gametes,
Yeah, go for it.
Fundamentally, like I think it's kind of funny when I hear people say that, when they say, "Oh, well, you didn't check my chromosomes at the door." Well, it's just like the reason why I don't really need to check your chromosomes at the door is because most people who are women, right, or identify as women, are biological women. It's like 99% of women who who identify as a woman are biological women. So yeah, I don't think it's that ridiculous for me to assume that a woman is going to be biologically a woman when she enters the room. Like I don't need to check every individual person's chromosomes in order to be like, oh, you're a liar or you're telling the truth. That's like me saying like, oh, did you check my birth certificate before you asked my name? Well, it's just like, no, but I mean, I'm not going to assume you're fucking lying to me. If you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
My
Sorry,
birth
it's kind of
certificate.
funny, bro. It's kind of funny.
Haha, gotcha. It's not my name. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Bro, but I mean, it's crazy. It's like, dude, it's your physiology. You
Yeah.
don't need to look at chromosomes. You can just look at your physiology, okay? Men and women have different physiology, very distinctly different physiology. And sure, there's some edge cases where some people kind of look androgynous, but for the most part, you can easily see the difference between men and women.
Yeah, and if you could trick
Men.
some people into thinking that there are certain men that look like women that are act like, for instance, like if there are certain transgender women that could walk in the door, and I'll assume that they're a woman, right? Because they look and they like there's some transgender women that look like very well like women, right?
Yeah.
But I'm gonna assume that that person's a woman because they look like a woman, but that's not because I I looked at the chromosomes. It was like, okay, so therefore they're a woman. It's because for the most of the time, when you see a person that's dressed and acts like a woman, they're biologically a woman, and it's a very small percentage of the time when they are not actually a woman. So I don't think it's that ridiculous to assume that most of the people who look and identify as women are generally actually women. It doesn't invalidate the fact that there are biological women and there are transgender women, and that those two things are two separate things. Just because once in a while, I might be convinced that a person that is a man may be actually a woman. That doesn't change the fact that they aren't a man.
Yeah.
You're a woman.
How society, at least most societies as well, outside of like Western as well, but even Western, we can make this argument.
Okay.
What they would look at is the way that a person is like necessarily performing. So what is their role? That's why you have like the idea of like non-binary, third gender, et cetera, because there have been people also who have not performed their role as like a male or female. So they're put
Sure.
into the third category, third sex, whatever.
Okay.
So I would argue that for the vast majority of human histories and societies, what they look at is what is your performance. And that maps on to what we do now, because we don't really look at biology, we look at people act. That's why, let me finish.
Go ahead.
That's why we also, the terms less manly, he's less of a man than him, or she's not that womanly, makes sense. If gender was truly a binary, those words would make no sense. It would be like cat and not cat. That doesn't, you can't have a.
No, she's dumb. The thing is, when people say more of a man and less of a or more of a woman, it's colloquial, okay? It's not like literal. We're not speaking literally you're less of a man. We're saying you're colloquial, or you're exhibiting less masculine traits. So it's when you're saying you're less of a man, you're not even saying you're less of a man. You're saying you're being less masculine. And it's just a total colloquial term, okay?
Yeah, it's just masculinity and femininity. You know what I'm saying? You could say that your masculinity and your femininity doesn't define your sex. What defines your sex is your biology. So yeah, you can act like a woman all day, but it doesn't matter. You are biologically who you are.
Yep.
In between, really. And the same thing applies for gender. There is a spectrum there. That's why the words less womanly, more manly, less manly makes sense to us.
And all of those things are fluid throughout time. Like what constituted like masculine tendencies or behaviors will be different now than it was several years ago. Or even like things like colors. Like for example, pink used to be considered a masculine color. Pink is no longer really considered a masculine color. It's considered a feminine color. So there was never anything inherently masculine about the color blue or the color pink or anything like that. That could always change at any given point in time.
Do you think that male brains and female brains, or men and women brains, are different? Wired differently?
There are differences between male and female brains, but I believe it's a matter of like statistical averages of like gray matter. There's not going to be like distinct anatomical features that differentiate a female brain from a male brain.
Really? You really think that?
Well, no, it's proven, like scientifically.
Well,
like
no,
when we
it's
take,
not.
yes, it
No.
is. When we take a brain scan of a male,
There's no
and
way
female,
that she believes this.
the average doctor can't look.
I think he just doesn't know.
I mean, there's no way. There's no way. Like, even when you look at studies like across the world, so I was watching this one thing on John Stossel where he basically, it was like a boys versus girls, and he did he saw a guy who did a study where he asked boys and girls from cultures all across the world to draw pictures and to pick between a teddy bear and a car, right? And like 90% of the time, the boys picked the car and would draw like,
Violence. I bet.
actions or violence or, something with, with action or, them doing something. Whereas women, they would draw pictures of their family and people and things like that. Men are more like object people. We like cars and physical objects, whereas women, they're more people. So because of that, now obviously there are outliers, right? But the anyway, what I'm trying to say, I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're saying that there's a difference between men and women's brains.
Yeah, there's a difference between men and different women's brains, right? And when we put it to the test and we test children and we test people and we just basically look at their choices, you sort of see that play out in real life because like boys, they're more adventurous. They like things. So they're going to pick the car over the teddy bear, whereas children, they like women and kids, girls, they like to play with teddy bears and like, stuffed animals and stuff like that because they're more of a caring thing. That isn't something that is just simply taught, right? That is a biological thing because this is something that happens in every single culture, even in cultures where there's the least amount of sexism in the law and things like that, like places like Norway and Sweden and a lot of these Western countries where there are protections for women, right? And they're generally respected, right? And yet you still see them having these differences between men and women. So what that shows is that there's something biologically different between men and women that sort of make us act in the way that we do. And obviously, again, there are outliers. Not every woman acts in the way that is stereotypically expected of them to act, and the same thing with men. But to say that there isn't something biologically going on there, that there is no difference between men and women in terms of their brain and their physiology, it's nonsense. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, all you need to do is just step outside and interact with men and women and to realize this. I think what the problem with these people is they want to. This is what I think I noticed with a lot of these people, right? Is they look at the trans movement as being like the new civil rights movement, right? Where like back in the old days when there was like Jim Crow and all of these racist laws, there was people standing up for these minorities and being like, yeah, these are injustices in the law. And they wanted to be those people. They want to basically be those people that stand up for the oppressed group. And they want to be marked down in history as being that person that has, protected that oppressed group. And this is what I think is going on with like transgender people, right? Where they look at transgender people as today's like civil rights movement, where it's like they have to be the ones in the front lines defending trans people in every single way, even if it doesn't make any sense, because they want to be marked down in history as the people who were on the right side of history. And I think that's like a big portion of why a lot of these people sort of close their eyes to a lot of this shit, and they like live in la la land and act as if none of this shit is none of biology is true, so that they could be on the right side of history. That's really what I think is going on with a lot of people. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I think it's in spectrums depending on your IQ. So I've watched a lot of stuff related to you've heard of Mentis Wave, right?
Yeah, I love that guy.
Mentis Wave is great. But he's talked about like IQ a lot and stuff, and like the differences between your political affiliation and your IQ and the things you'll believe. And I think on the left, people with lower IQs are what you said before. Like people with like below 100 or maybe 100 IQs are the people who are like, oh, we're standing up for what's right, because they physically like they just don't understand what's actually happening in society. But then I think that on the higher levels of the IQ, I think it is a grift, because I think that they do really understand the truth of the matter. Like this chick right here. This chick seems. Can you see my mouse?
Yeah, I can see her. Yeah, her.
Okay.
Isn't it her name Pixie or something like that?
No. Pixie's this one right here, blonde. In the
okay,
pink
got
dress.
you.
the one in the white dress with the black hair, she's the smartest girl on this panel, and I would say she's probably one of the better lefty debaters because she does have like a firm understanding. I don't know. I would be skeptical if she genuinely believes that this is like the new civil rights movement. She seems too intelligent for that. I would probably consider her teetering on the edge of grifting because I think she's smart enough to know what she's talking about. But it's really hard to tell.
It's kind of hard to tell because she seems so smart. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And very well spoken. And it's kind of hard for me to hear somebody that's so smart and well spoken say things like this as if it's like fact. You know what I mean? It almost makes you immediately be like, oh, she must be grifting. But you know, there are some very smart people who believe pretty wild things, you know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the reason why she may believe this, but like I said earlier, it's kind of hard to believe that someone who's as smart as she seems to be and is very well spoken fully believes this. It's almost mind blowing.
Yeah,
you know?
And to be fair, also, I don't know what it's like. I can't comprehend what it must be like to be a grifter. So I can't possibly imagine what IQ level you would be at to be a grifter. I can only imagine that you would have to be intelligent to know the truth and then switch the truth so that you can profit off of it, which I would imagine to be higher than 100 IQ. But again, I don't know where that level happens. Like, is it at 110? Is it at 120, 130, 140? At one point, are you like smart enough to know the truth, but then you're just trying to, you know, make a profit?
Yeah, I think that with some people, they have an ideology that they support, and then they sort of gravitate around people who only believe that ideology, and then sometimes they get sunken down certain rabbit holes, and that could also be another explanation. You know, with a lot of these people, I noticed that a lot of these people, they only talk to other people who also agree with them. So otherwise intelligent people, when they hear the same thing over and over again, you know, they end up believing it. So, you know, I don't know. I just think it's a little bit ridiculous for these women to say that there's no such thing difference between men and women in terms of like their brain and their physiology and all of that. It's just ridiculous. There's a reason why there are, we don't put men and women athletes in the same league. You know, there's a reason why we separate between men and women, even in, you know, like
Chess.
Sports that aren't really as physically capable. You know what I mean? Maybe like chess or something
chess,
like
for
that,
example.
or even gaming. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't see male
video games.
Like women, when you see women leagues, generally they're fighting other women leagues because they're not going to be as good as the men in that thing, you know. And like, you could sit there and say, oh, it's because of sexism all you want, but we're becoming less and less and less of a sexist society, and all of these things are still prevalent. So it's just like, okay, well, I don't think it's really sexism. I don't. I just think there's something biological going on here.
And there's definitely a deeper dive to be had about like the differences between men and women's brains, which I think Charlie's about to talk about. But like, there are like some significant differences in our brains. Like, men are more spatially aware. So they're really good at, like, I guess, understanding like 3D, like real life scenarios, like geometry and stuff in real life. Like, they have like a sort of geometric intuition, which is why they're so good at like playing sports and just like physical activity in general. But that also translates to like the love of mathematics and like engineering and sciences and hard sciences kind of transfers into competitive fields like shooting guns or playing chess or playing video games. Yeah, sure, there's like a small physical component to all of those things, but for the mass difference there is like, there's just like a neurological difference between men and women as far as those fields go.
It can be like, that is a male brain right there.
Not true.
Now,
No, hold on.
Wait,
if
let me
you do a
finish my
SPECT
sentence, please.
scan, okay, if you do a SPECT scan, you can see what parts of the brain light up. And in a woman, the basal ganglia and the amygdala is far more active, which is the inner thought matrix. Women have a far busier inner thought life than men do. Would you guys agree with that?
I agree.
Right,
I was
but-
gonna say it's very.
So that's not true.
It's very well known that like men generally are more on the logical side of things, and women are more on the emotional side of things. And I think that
that's so
has
true.
a big role, or the way that our brains are wired has a big role to play. I'm not saying that if you took babies who were completely unmolded that, you know, their brains would look different, but I think as we age, living in the gender that we are given, you know, our brains become attuned to certain things, and that's why parts of our
Yeah,
brain
like
light up.
piggybacking off of that
Yeah.
point, I don't doubt that the studies that you looked at did find differences in like brain mapping scans between men and women, but the key thing is that they looked at men and women. So that's already a brain that's been
No.
subjected to a lifetime, or not a lifetime, but like decades long
So do you-
socialization.
let-
So
I-
that
I just
socialization
wanna
is going to impact it. If you looked
Socialization.
at like a brain
Yeah, it's the whole socialization.
Yeah, that's
thing.
like our whole ideology is just pretty much, okay, men are men because people told them to be men, and women are women because what people told women to be women. And that's the only reason why there's differences between men and women. If only we stop telling men to be men and stop telling women to be women and raise everybody equally and treated everybody equally, then men in the category of men and women would disappear and we'd live in a beautiful utopia from here on to eternity. And I'm sorry, you're just wrong.
Bro, it's like, have you never? I mean, you're right, but it's like, have you never seen children before? Like, boys are on the ground trying to like murder each other, right? That like every second of the day, little boys are trying to like tackle each other, like pull out each other's hair. They're trying to kill each other, and then like little girls can be energetic, but like, you know, they're not trying to destroy each other like physically.
Yeah,
And
they're
it's
playing like
you don't
Dollhouse and shit
you
like
don't-
that, and
dude,
Barbies.
Dad doesn't socialize little Johnny to go rip out Steven's hair. You know, that's not socialized. That is anatomical. That is physiological. That is, that is in the nature of boys. It's in their DNA. They have more, is it testosterone? I don't know. It's just in their nature to be more, you know, violent and, you know, active. Whereas girls are different than that. That's not socialized. You don't socialize girls and boys differently. Like, that's crazy.
I mean, but the reason why we kind of socialize men and women differently to a certain degree is because of our biology. You know what I mean? All of this socialization didn't come from nowhere. You know, we didn't just one day wake up as a society and said, okay, we're going to treat women like this and we're going to treat men like this. Women had roles and were created, well, not created, but we were made with to adapt to certain roles, and women adapted
so
to the
glad you
role of
accepted
being
Jesus.
mothers. Maybe later. But what I was going to say was that men were adapted to fit certain roles because of our environment, and women were adapted to fit certain role because of their environment. That's kind of the reason why we are the way that we are today. You know, we have a lot of fundamentally we're animals. You know what I mean? We're products of our environment, and that's why there are certain what we would consider be illogical things that humans do today, right? But we do it still because of our biology. You know, we gossip about each other, we talk shit about each other, we look at certain people as being above other people and below other people. We tend to protect our own. Those are all sort of like biological things that were kind of instilled into us through generations of environments, sort of making us into the way that we are, you know? So yeah, it isn't simply like, oh, one day everybody just decided, okay, women are going to be this and men are going to be this, and we just stuck with it. And now women act like and men are different only because we decided to treat men and women differently. But it's just, and if only we made everybody equal, then, you know, everything is just going to complete, all of this gender and sex is just going to, you know, wash away. That's pretty much their whole ideology. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't buy out in this. Like, all you need to do is just look at any scientific study, observe reality, and there you go.
Kind of like infants, for example, like a male infant and a female infant, it would be like how different would it really look? Do you think it would look
immensely
significantly different?
No, it's not even
Immensely
close.
different.
Of course it's different. And I could prove it to you in two ways. But the first one, do you guys know the John Money gender experiment?
No.
So okay, I'll just really quick. John Money, who is
That
a total
shit is
creep,
really fucked up,
He
that story.
believed that this is before we
Yeah.
mapped the human genome. Okay, this is before we even knew
Do you
about
know about
chromosomes.
that?
He said that
Is this the one where he took the twins?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know about this.
Yeah. I think
He's
both
about
of
to
them
talk
killed
about it too.
themselves, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Later in life, yeah.
men and women are blank slates at birth, and he said that they're formed through the toys we give them, the colors we appropriate to them, and they're blank slates. There was these identical twins. One of the twins burns themselves terribly in the genitals, and he said raise that twin as a girl. And basically his entire life he was tortured, and awful story. Eventually rebelled against John Money, and this twin eventually was told that, hey, you were born a boy but raised as a girl, and even had a vagina put onto you artificially. And he was like, instead of being mad, he was relieved, because he said, I knew I was a boy all along. So there's no clinical evidence to support that. Secondly, though, it's a funnier one, okay? Do you hear me out? And I think this will resonate with all of you. Harvard University locked a group of men in a room alone, 100 of them, and a group of women in a room alone, okay? And they said, what did you think about for 30 minutes? The men, no surprise, sex and sports. The young ladies, what did they think of for 30 minutes? They replayed conversations that they had in the last couple of days.
Real.
For the record, a man has never replayed conversations that they've had.
Do that?
I
Our
do that
brains-
all the time.
Our brains are
Too.
different.
Have you ever heard of that before?
I never heard of that exact study, but it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, in the end of the day, us men and women are different. You know what I'm saying? That's just a fact of life. And I think it's kind of crazy that these people are like trying to deny it. I don't know, bro.
Imagine replaying a conversation in your mind. How would you?
Yeah.
How would you
Like-
even do that, bro?
Yeah.
You'd have to have crazy memory. Oh my god.
Yeah. Women,
It's probably why girls are
They're-
better in school. They might have better memory.
I mean, yeah. I would say so. Also, our schools are pretty much catered to women nowadays.
To women,
because-
yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Do you really not do that?
I feel like I overthink
No, of
everything.
course not.
You don't
Hold
think
on,
about
I'm making-
conversations. that
You've
you
never
have?
had like a shower arguments or like shower thoughts or anything like that?
No, and that's not society, my friend. That is biology.
That's biology.
You are wired to have those rethought. We aren't.
Yeah.
It's not a learned behavior. It's not about dolls. It's not about dresses. Our biology, our brains are made differently.
You've
I don't
really
think
never thought
anyone's
about
disputing
Freaking
that
got
we
him,
have,
dude. Checkmate.
Yeah,
as
you know-
Brian would say, checkmate.
I think it's kind of funny. I think it's kind of funny when they're like, huh? You've never done that? What?
Yeah.
What? Men and women are different?
Are different,
What?
bro? That's
Huh?
crazy, dude.
What? No way. You ever see those that one?
Big
meme?
brain
No way.
Oh wait, what's that from?
I think it's the movie with Keanu Reeves and the other guy, and he's like, no way.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think it's kind of funny. They're like having a epiphany, like in a magical, like coming to Jesus moment, where they're just like, wait a minute, men don't do the same thing. They don't think the same way as us. What?
It's a light
Huh?
bulb moment for sure.
Yeah, like.
Yeah, dude. When I first heard that, because I watched this clip a while ago, I was like, wait, women do what now? They replay conversations? Like, why? I was just trying to figure out why they do that, but that's crazy to me.
I don't know why they do that. That's a good question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it must be something biological.
Replay
I
any
agree with that.
conversations.
Ever.
Men
I agree
don't.
with
You've never
that, but
like done that.
The thing.
Am
where
Am I trans? Because
people-
sometimes sometimes I will.
You gotta go on.
Very
hormone
rarely
blockers.
though.
Yeah.
Very rarely. Sometimes, occasionally.
Men are
I'll
very
replay the
forward
conversation.
thinking. What is next? The job, the interview, tomorrow. And not saying women aren't. Women are very reflective. That's why females are better at poetry. Women are better at the more relational type aspects of being a nurse or an elementary school teacher. Again, that's not learned behavior. There is a biological element to it. And it starts with, we don't even understand the brain as much as we can. We understand like 1% of 1% of it. But I think that study and your reaction affirms it. Because if I had a group of men around you, like, what do you think of when you're alone? Like, I just think of the NFC Championship game, the stock market, and
World of
all the
Warcraft.
women I've been with or the women
Yeah,
I want to be
exactly.
with. It's a little different.
Do you think if they had conducted the study in a different country, that the men and women would have given these same answers?
Yes, I think that these things are universal. And I mean, I can't say to that. That would be my speculation.
They've
that,
done these studies
the
in
men
other
Iran
countries, too.
Are thinking.
You know what I'm saying?
Probably.
No, I mean, I mentioned a study earlier where the guy, he went to like multiple different countries and
John
he asked
Stossel.
children to draw.
Yeah.
yeah, he asked children to draw stuff, and each country, you saw similar, things that the boys were drawing and with the children drawing. Generally it was different, the things that they were drawing, So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a, it's not, it's something biological here, huh?
Bro, it's almost hard to find things that are not different. It's almost harder to find like things that are not different between men and women than things that are different, because there's just so many more
Similarities,
differences. Yeah. So I mean, it's crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about soccer and Persian women, and the women are thinking about, what's going on in their local neighborhood. These things transcend continent, they transcend culture, and we know that because one of the arguments that you were making is that, well, at the fundamental root, these are learned and acted, these are put on by Western society, but you go into African villages, like very poor third world African villages, they don't even have a term for transgender. The idea that a man can become a woman or a woman can become man, this is a uniquely Western phenomenon that is born out of the academy, born out of college, that I will say, and I think we could agree, is largely they prey on people that have other underlying issues, and then it gets built on top of that. Autism spectrum disorder, depression, anxiety, some other sort of bipolar, schizophrenia, trauma, things of that nature.
There's a couple of things to push back here. Brian.
If you can, quick.
I don't mean to monopolize. I'm sorry, Pixie.
No, it's okay. There's a couple of things. I do want to push back on that because there are communities and cultures that we could search up right now in China, India, various Native American histories that have recognized the idea of third gender or outside gender that doesn't fit into this binary. So I wouldn't say it's just Western.
That is
and then
true.
on top
Wait,
of that,
let him answer.
No, but no, you please continue. You are right. I can address that at length. I don't think it's fruitful.
Okay,
Keep
okay,
going.
go ahead.
Okay.
You're not wrong.
And then on top of that, you gave a case study. I kind of want to give a case study back. NPR did a article on this. I can't remember the name, but basically it was about a person who felt gender fluid. And when they felt like they were a man and they did things like facial recognition or other tests regarding that, they would score like a man does, higher than most women. But when they got into the mindset of being a woman, they would score higher in woman-related tasks. So yeah, it does come back. You're saying this is all predisposed biology, but there might be something to be said about oh no, if you're thinking like a man, the mindset of a man, maybe that's more in tune with certain ways of thinking versus thinking like a woman. That doesn't mean it's all 100% biological basis. It means that hey, if you're raised to think in a certain pattern, you're going to perform in that pattern.
I agree. I mean, if a society can mold you, of course, but you're dealing with very powerful raw material that's underestimated in the current cultural conversation, and you can only guide that raw material so much. So let me ask another hypothetical. I'll just tell you, if I sit down with men, what do they always talk about? They talk about macro concepts, big things, stock market, sports, things that are very, let's just say bigger than individual. Women, if you sit down, they'll talk a lot about conversations or relationships, their kids, very micro. This, one of the reasons why men and women brains are different, and they continue to be different, is there's different skill sets. And I think we can all acknowledge that. Men are better at some things than women, and women are better at some things than men. I don't know why that is a wildly
the way that you frame it is women are awesome at small talk and sewing or whatever, and then men are just awesome at the stock market and being CEOs.
Let me ask you a question. But hold on. Let me ask you a question. Why is it that the International Chess Foundation doesn't want biological men who believe they are women to compete with women? They say that will not allow trans men into the female category. Why is that?
I can't speak to that, but if you're going to talk about representation being the thing that lets you know that men are obviously smarter, you could break this down to race.
I never said smarter. I said different.
Then different.
Women,
okay, then we could say this.
My wife does things with my child that I can't even dream of doing, such as having an intuition, compassion, empathy. She can operate on 30 minutes of sleep. I need 8 hours, or else I'm like a dead.
Don't underestimate yourself, Charlie.
Hold
I
on
think
a
you
second.
can definitely
No.
do
Hold
these
on.
types of
No,
things.
women have a different giftedness, I believe, given by God that is completely different than men. I never said smarter. In fact, a woman's intuition is far better than my intuition. I trust my wife's gut when it comes to people, when it comes to relationships, and she leans on me for investments or politics. We are given different gifting. Now, with that being said, some women have a gifting in that direction. Those are the exception, though. There is a general rule, and the general rule is that women are far more gifted at people and caretaking and the intimate. I don't mean that demeaning or derogatory. I never use the word smarter or dumber.
I
that you might
agree.
be inferred. Oh, thank you, Molly.
Yeah. No, I actually very much agree with what you're saying. Me personally, I mean, sexuality is a big part of my life. And I think what you're saying actually really ties into a lot of like sexuality, because it's the man's role to be, kind of like I mean, if you're talking like the nuclear family, it's like the man's role to kind of be the governing force of the family, take care of everything on the outside, take care of, the finances, the stocks, all of that, and to kind of be the rock for all of the little things that the woman has to go through during the day. Just all the little conversations, all the things that she has to deal with that you're not there. And I think that, it's a really beautiful thing, like yin and yang, like there's
beautiful.
Parts of men that complement women, and there's parts of women that complement men. And the best thing is there's things that women can do that men cannot, and there's things that men can do that women cannot. And I think.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much. I think we got to the gist of that conversation. Okay, so I gotta say, I think that Charlie Kirk here, debate review. Debate review. I think he did a pretty good job. Making his arguments. Pixie and the other lady, I forgot what her name is. I've seen them on Destiny's show a few times. That's why I know one of their names.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're very well spoken women. They seem to be very smart, but I just completely disagree with them. When Charlie Kirk was kind of questioning them, they weren't really holding up. They weren't being very consistent with their ideology. And there was many points where it almost felt like Charlie Kirk was almost teaching them about biology, about reality, something that they should already know, something, And when he was explaining his things, they were almost baffled by the things that he was saying. Like the part when he was like, no, men don't really think about that. Oh, men don't really think about that. We think about that all the time. It's like, wow, like, are you kidding? Are you guys kidding me right now? Yeah, you guys should already know this, like, you guys, we're all human beings here. We're all adults here. We should all know by now that there are obvious differences between men and women. I think the problem with a lot of these people is they kind of put on the blinders on, and so that they could make themselves look better or put themselves on the right side, or I don't think it's necessarily a malicious thing. I think it's I think it's mainly just like they want to. I like there's a lot of people, like, it's like a lot of socialists, right? Where they mean well, right? They want to help transgender people. They want to help the poor. They want to help the proletariat. But the way in which they're helping and the way the ideology that they're pushing is not helping, and it's harming, in fact. And they're not realizing it because in their mind, they're helping out these poor, oppressed groups, So they're sort of blinded by the idea of helping these oppressed groups. And they kind of put on these blinders. And then when they're confronted with the evidence, they don't really have anything to say because they know they're not really being consistent fundamentally.
Yeah. And that's why I continuously love returning to the Whatever podcast, because they always go into topics like this one that are just so interesting. And there's so many collaborations and discussions and debates I want to see had between different people. And it's always just fun to see the difference of opinions, especially with, girls like Pixie and the other one against, people like Brian and Charlie who have, different points. And I don't know, it's just a really cool conversation that, like, you would never see this side of Charlie Kirk if he wasn't on the podcast, because the podcast is a nice setting because, you're all right there. You're all paying attention in a round table and you all have your ideas and your beliefs, and then you're getting your beliefs challenged right there. So it's a good discussion overall. Obviously, there's a difference between men and women. The question is, are you just going to acknowledge it or not? That's the question.
It's kind of funny that even that's needed to be said.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to wrap up, like I said, Charlie Kirk, I think he did a good job. He was very well spoken, very respectful, wasn't rude, didn't talk over them. He allowed them both to speak, and both sides were both very respectful to each other, which I thought was a good. I completely disagree with the women on the panel, but they seem to be pretty well spoken, and yeah, it was a good conversation.